Today I'll be interviewing JStyffe, coach and one of the earliest adopters of neurofeedback, helping individuals find their way in life. John, thank you so much for being here today. I've known you over the years. You were one of the very first leaders when it came to topics like biofeedback, neurofeedback, coaching and helping people through dark times. I'm fascinated by your story. Tell me a little bit about the story and the journey and how you've become, over the last few years, focused on a way of living.
Yeah, it's quite the story now. I'm 69, so what's happening now? I'm kind of thinking back on the past, doing a little bit of writing, and I guess what I've recently discovered that it's time that I talk about my story openly, so that people can identify and it can help them in the long run. So I was, I'm 70, so I was a hippie back in the old days, and the interesting thing was, when I was a teenager, I was doing some drinking, I was doing some drugs, some marijuana and stuff like that. And I happened to be visiting my sister, who was living in Florida at the time. And we'd been smoking grass every night and so on. And then one day I woke up and I was sitting on the edge of the bed and I said to myself, if I continue on like this, when I'm 27, I'm going to have nothing. And my friends who decided to do something will have something. And I said, no, I want to do something. I want to make a change. So what I did was I went back home into Canada, got into university, but I was still having my drinking problem and not doing so well. So I went back home after a year or so, and my mother was also an alcoholic, and she quit drinking. And she helped me get into a treatment center. And then I got in the treatment center and quit the drinking, and they suggested at the time, John, why don't you become a therapist? You're good at what you do. And of course I had a background of business. So of course I didn't listen. So I went back home and I got into, I got my university degree. I went back and got into business. And eventually, again, the business, I eventually started to drink again. Now, I wasn't a 7 days a week, 24 hours a day drinker. Sometimes a binge drinker, drinking on the weekends, but it was how it affected me, how it affected my personality and so on, and my emotions. But anyways, I continued on, and then I met my wife and in Toronto, and we got married. I came back home, and then when I was about 40, my drinking had increased because what happened was I'd quit smoking. And then I had to do a lot of events. So I would go to the events and I'd be going, what am I going to do? I want to have a cigarette. So I started doing more of this. So we had decided, well, we're going to move back to Switzerland, where my wife was from. And we came back. And then I was back here for a couple years and not knowing what to do and so on, and not really in a good state. And then my mother came to visit, and my mother said to me, and she said, John, I want to go back home. I want to leave, because she says, you are threatening my sobriety. Now, she didn't do it for me, she did it for herself. But it had an effect on me. It made me think. I got rejected from my mother. And then a couple of days, or sometime later, I had a big fight with my wife, and I said, oh, God, I don't want to lose my family. And then one day, I was walking up a little hill before our house, and I said, you know what? All I want is peace of mind. And that was the beginning of the journey. And so I quit drinking, went to AA on a regular basis, started reading every book you could. I was highly motivated, walking, listening to self-help discs and stuff, but I worked at it. And then it was interesting. I got into a thing called neurofeedback a few years later, because I knew somebody who was close to me, and they had some concentration problems. They were on the medication Ritalin, and they said, I want to get off it. And so I happened to read about the neurofeedback, and it was amazing. Also, my wife had been seeing I had been seeing a therapist, and the therapist said, you know so much about this ADD stuff. Why don't you get into the field? So with this person saying that, and then it all came together, and I happened to read a magazine article in Psychology Today about neurofeedback. And then what happened was I went to down to New Orleans. Now what happened was I had been suffering from stress.
Yeah.
And so I went down to this, and we had a course, a workshop, and then during one of the things we did training ourselves. Well, I'd had all the stress on that, and I went back to my hotel room, sat down, and I happened to look at the TV before we go for dinner, and I happened to turn my neck. There was nothing. Whoa. Now, I had been seeing therapists and massage and all that stuff, right? And then we had to go for dinner, for seafood. We had to wait in the restaurant. I walked around. I was relaxed, like I'd smoked a joint. So what I did was, next day I wrote a check, bought the equipment, and that was my journey into the neurofeedback world.
Yeah.
If I go through my past, one of the most important things was when I first went into to get the help for the alcohol, it was, the motivation was extrinsic. You know, I'm going to be successful. I want all this. The second time around was intrinsic. That's one thing I realized. It was an inside motivation. That this is what I want to do. I want to do something for myself. I want peace of mind. That's it. I wasn't looking for, of course, the other motivations. I didn't want to lose my family. It was a great motivation, but I wanted peace of mind. That was the key. Then I got into neurofeedback.
So, you know, your journey is incredible because you've had the experience and you've overcome those dark times yourself.
Yes.
And then use that experience to learn about how to also then help others through their dark times. Why is that so important for other people? You know, why and what kind of help are you giving to other people now?
Well, like as I said, I got into the neurofeedback, and one of the things with the neurofeedback, the key was self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was in AA, and they talked a lot about letting go. And I was working hard at trying to let go. I tell you, I wanted to figure this out. Let go. I've got to let go. And then when I did the neurofeedback, and I did a thing called alpha theta training. And what happened was, it's an indication, and you go back, you lay back, and it'll indicate when you're in different states. And there's what we call an alpha state, and then a theta state. When you're in theta, then you're in a lower state. And so I'm doing this thing, somebody's working with me on it, and so I'm listening, and it's indicated by sound of water on a creek or water on, or waves on the beach. Those were the two indicators, and the water's on the beach is when you're low. So I get this sound, I'm laying back, I get the sound of the water on the beach. And I say to myself, oh, this is where I am, this is where I'm supposed to be. And boom, I'm out of it. And I got the message. I got the idea of letting go, to stop trying to control. And I had to let go. And this has been my journey now. That's been the whole journey all the way through. And there's a major problem today is people have so much anxiety. Anxiety is about control. I have to. And they force it. That's the way I was. That was my life. I was always trying to control and force myself. And I realized the first half of my life was full of fear. Mm-hmm. Right? I was so afraid of what people were thinking. I had to have the best clothes, the best dishes. And now I think one of the biggest messages that I can have is, and I have it on my WhatsApp, a picture of a person going like this and the chains are broken.
Yeah.
And that's the message, is now the chains are broken. I can be who I am. I can be independent. I can depend on me. I let go. And it's such a wonderful state now at this time of my life. Such peace. And I don't worry about what other people are thinking, but I have to survive in my environment. So I got to be a little bit careful about what I say. I have kind of a weird sense of humor at times. So I got to be careful, especially here in Switzerland, as you know. So the point is that I can let go.
Yeah.
But it takes a continuous letting go. It's a practice. And so what I found was, and when I was going through the AA program, it was a program, but it was a way of living. Mm-hmm. You see, when I quit drinking, right, the drinking helped me to calm myself because I was full of anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. So I had to adopt a new way of living and practice. Yeah. My old way was before fear and so on, and have to, and impress me, all that stuff, money, everything. Whereas the other half was I let go of that fear, and what is life all about? It's really having some peace.
So how, with all of that fantastic experience, how are you helping others overcome their anxieties and their fears and their dark times? How are you going about doing that?
Well, one of the things that I learned, I got into working in, I had my own practice. I worked for a psychiatrist. I worked in the field. And what I found in my work with the neurofeedback, one of the keys was also talking about my experiences. And because if you go to some places, you just talk. And also a lot of people don't have experience. They have a lot of book knowledge. But my experience I found, and one psychiatrist told me one day, he says, "John, you can't talk about your experiences." I didn't listen to him because I realized that talking about my experience and bringing myself down to their level, okay, and that's why, and with the neurofeedback, I did a lot of neurofeedback, and I still do. I do it on myself. What it did is it helped me to understand what they were going through, what they were experiencing. And what I also did in my training was I had to observe how they were reacting. So if somebody was sitting going like this, you know that there was a lot of stuff going on, and I would and so I could respond and understand what they were going through. So the thing is right now is just how do I help people right now is I think one of the things is I talk a lot, and often my wife says too much, but I will talk, and I talk about my personal experiences, bring myself down to them, and it helps this way. So I had to find out what is my purpose in living, and I realized, and some other people have suggested write a book. So yes, what is the book? So if I can even go back even further, but one thing I was sitting down a few years ago, and I said, okay, what's my purpose? And I said, okay, I realized that with the neurofeedback, I could put people in a state, and they would feel, oh, great. But they would go back out, and especially I worked with children. And the children would come to me, I would calm them down, and then I would send them back home to that crazy atmosphere, which would bring them back to that state again. And it was very defeating. So what I had to do was I realized is that the second process, which people don't realize, is that they have to learn, what do I need to do? And it was about self-regulation, independence. What do I need to do to keep myself in those states? We can become dependent on the neurofeedback, and I can make the money and stuff like that. And I often tell people that my success is when you don't have to come back and see me anymore.
And that's a great success. And maybe building then on successes, what would you say over the last 5 or so years have been your greatest personal successes?
Well, I need to tell you is it's interesting during these past couple of years with the pandemic. I've had some people call me, send me messages, and saying, thank you. You helped change my life. And it was interesting, even though it wasn't. I also I have been doing an entrepreneurs group every Tuesday morning. And in that group, I told people I wouldn't allow them to sell or promote their products. What they would do is we would go in and talk and share. And about the trials and tribulations about being an entrepreneur, which is basically how to be life. And then I ran into a guy a couple of weeks ago up at a market, and we're walking by. All of a sudden he said, John Stiff? And I said, yeah. He took off his hat and stuff, and his name was Stefan Schaffhausen. And he was really a young fellow. He said, John, you helped me so much. What you did, that meeting. And you know what? After it was such a phenomenal feeling that I had an effect, that I had done something in life. Not just making money or having a nice car. It was, I really had an effect. That's what you might call success. And it's been that I've had an effect. It's a
great reward when you get people come back to you and really say, thank you so much, you've changed my life for the better. Right? It's super, super rewarding. I think that's often what drives some of the best coaches, the best neurofeedback coaches, etc. Often seeing the results and getting that feedback firsthand. So I know one of the topics you're passionate about is people helping each other. So explain that a little bit to me. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I call is, basically I call it support and encouragement. So you support your people, so especially within my family, you support them, and then to encourage people, right? So one of the first things that when I got into the neurofeedback, okay, was that I had a son who was a little bit messy and so on. And so I was doing a lot of controlling, telling him what to do, clean up, do this, do that. And then after I got on the neurofeedback, I had an awakening. And I realized he wasn't the problem, I was. So what I had to learn to do was to let go. I had to learn about him. I had to learn what motivates him. And that he was different. He had a sister. They were different, both of them. So what I needed to do was support and encourage him. And so that's what I've been practicing in my life, and I work hard at it. And one of the things is that I had, when I was working for the psychiatrist, we had a dinner party. I have a special diet. So we had this dinner party. And I went to the woman after. She had to treat me a little bit differently. I went to her after, and I said, you did such a great job. And you know what she said to me? She said, I've never heard that before. And and I think that's so sad.
Yeah.
And what I find now, just practicing a little in a restaurant, I'll say, you did a great job. Thank you so much. The response is a big smile from ear to ear. It's phenomenal. And this is what we need to do in business. We need to learn, instead of saying, here's a bonus. It's empty. What we need to learn to do is say, you did a great job. It's as simple as that. It goes so far. There was a fellow who wrote a book, and he talked about people getting bonuses, and it actually had a reverse effect.
Yeah.
So if you look at a carpenter, he can build a table, and he can stand back and say, look what I did. Whereas, so a lot of other places, it's hard to do that. It's just, look at my bonus, look at my money. Right now, is that our managers really need to practice saying, hey, you did a great job, wonderful. It'll go so far.
So let me summarize a bit, because you've talked so much good input that you've said. So, when people are struggling with fears, anxieties, burnout symptoms, whatever it might be, they're in that trap of life, then you can help them through that process. First of all, by being relatable, because you've been there yourself. You can use some of the biofeedback and the neurofeedback techniques, understanding the state of the brain, so that they can, first of all, identify when they're triggered a little bit, how they can recover from that, and then almost build the training so that they learn how to do that themselves independently, so that they don't need to keep coming back for help and support and the coaching that you give them. So with that summary, what might be a few kind of final words of wisdom that you would like to share with people?
One of the things you may be thinking, or brought up this thing, I've heard a lot about the comfort zone. And people have been saying, oh, he's in his comfort zone. I don't know about you, I've been depressed, and it's not comfortable. The whole point is that you can become stuck, okay? And the harder you try, the more stuck you are. And this is what the neurofeedback is wonderful about. Okay, it helps you to become unstuck. And the whole neuroscience field now is not about judgment of personality, of how good you are or you're bad or whatever. What it is that we can see how our brains function. And that we can affect how that brain functions. And it can change. I've worked with people who have had head injuries, and they have lots of side effects and stuff, and then their brain has become stuck, all right? And then what we can do is either stimulate it or train it, whatever, and we can change how that brain functions. But then again, after the whole purpose is then they've got to develop, and I've got to help them develop a way of living. It's not my way of living. It's not the Christian way. It's not whatever way. Is that my whole objective is that they find a way of living that is the best for them. Because each one of us is different. What applies for me may not apply for you, and vice versa, or anybody else. So that's my goal, to help people, is really to find their way that is best for them. And we have to stop listening to these old messages and beliefs. You have to, you need, you should be, you have to be successful, you have to study this, you have to have this. Stop listening to that stuff. And many times I've had experiences where I've talked to an executive and I've asked them, I say, what do you want? And I get a blank stare. Yeah. He knows what he should be doing. He knows he should have a car, a big house, he should have all this stuff. But on the inside, he's not trusting. Maybe he does know. What do I want? I knew a fellow who had success and money, and at the beginning he wanted to be in music. He didn't listen to that. That's what you've got to listen to. What do you want? And trust in that, instead of what you have to or need to do. And that's what creates a lot of the anxiety now. I have to, I need to, I should. Stop.
John, fantastic. So much rich insight to find people's own way of living with that. Thank you so much for coming in and spending some time with me today. Always an incredible conversation that we have. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
You were on fire at the end of that. That was amazing.